Hey, what's going on, everybody? My name is Corey, better known as the Seaman, and I want to welcome you to another edition of the Seaman's Cinema Sit-Down. Oh, man, I just went and saw this movie on Thursday night, opening night, and I really enjoyed the heck out of this movie. This movie is so much fun. I hope you saw my live reaction. If you didn't, please go check it out anyway. Way more amped up and very excited coming out of that movie. However, we have now sat down. We have calmed down. It is time to break down this flick. As I said, I loved this movie. But the more I've thought about it, this movie is not flawless. And there's definitely some things to talk about and discuss. But on the overall, really enjoy this movie. It's a ton of fun. The humor is fantastic. Very creative with the action stuff that's in the movie. There is an issue with it that we'll talk about in a minute. But the other thing I like about this movie, too, as I mentioned in my live reaction, it's kind of a palate cleanser for us. It doesn't carry this big weight as all these other movies are. And, you're going to see people fault this movie for not feeling like a Phase 3 caliber film. Because it is. It's more centralized. It's a standalone kind of a movie. Really, the only thing you need to see is Ant-Man to go see this flick. And I really personally like that. We kind of needed a break from just like having these huge expectation movies deliver these huge things, right? I mean, look, Avengers Infinity War, as I said in my live reaction, that movie takes its toll on you, even Black Panther, it's fun, but it is great. It's something a whole lot bigger. And every once in a while, it's nice to have a flick that doesn't have to go and reach to those places. Now, yes, you get to the end of this and you think about that, and there are definitely some places where they could have strived to go what they were doing. More like a Thor Ragnarok, not like a Black Panther per se, but you could have kind of gone to some places that I think really would have amped this movie even more than what we get. But, like I said, I love the fact that it's a standalone. I love that it's funny. I love that it kind of freshens us up before we dive back into, some real serious Marvel flicks. And I love everything that's going on, right? Like, the characters work really well. There's really nice emotional family beats in this movie. It's really got a family core to it, mixed in with elements of a heist movie. This is more of like a family story that has heist elements, whereas the first one really just did the heist stuff really well. But, those emotional beats work, those family beats work, and the humor in this movie is superb. It works so well. That, like I said, this movie is a lot of fun. I really enjoy it. But it does, in retrospect, the more I've thought about it, it feels like a transitional movie, right? It feels like it could be setting up something that is real big. And if we get around to a second Ant-Man and Wasp movie, I really would like to see them go for it. Like, go for it like this is a big-time Marvel movie. Don't make it feel like a smaller Marvel movie. Like I said, I think there's some opportunities, and we'll discuss that come spoiler talk time. That I think they could have gone some places with this movie that would have really amped it. But what they give us is awesome, man. Like I said, it's a ton of fun, this movie. For those unaware of Ant-Man and the Wasp, this is filling in our time. That's the other thing. The other reason it feels kind of like a transitional movie. This is filling in a time gap that we now have. This takes place right before Avengers Infinity War and leads us right up into those events. And it's a story that we need to know, right? Like, why was Scott not there? Obviously, we know he's on house arrest, but you need to fill in that timeline and repair that whole unit so we can move forward. And this movie does that very well. But the main point of this movie is Hope Van Dyne and Hank Pym are trying to get Janet back from the quantum realm. Now that Scott has gone and come back, they think that she might be out there and they might be able to grab her. So that's kind of the motivation and the push of the movie. And Scott kind of has to come in to help out. While juggling the fact that he's right at the end of his house arrest stint, and that plays to some really awesome stuff. But like I said, this movie is not without its faults. It took me a little while to calm down and think about them, but I haven't, man. We're going to dive into everything, spoiler-free, on Ant-Man and the Wasp, and you know me, how I roll. I like to start with the bad and end with the good, because I want you to go see this movie, man. This movie's a lot of fun, and you should go enjoy any kind of movie like this. Really, you know me, man. I love these movies. But look, the big bad for me in this movie, there's really no big surprises. As I said, the action in the movie is great. I think they're really inventive with the way Hope can use her blasters to shrink and enlarge things, and the way they use both Hope and Scott together as Ant-Man and the Wasp, and that all works really well. We've just seen it already. Almost every major action beat in this movie is in the trailers. Something that never happens with Marvel flicks, right? I always praise Marvel for the fact that when they do a trailer, they give you so much, but so much of what they give you really is just the first act of the movie and maybe a tease for what's down the line. This movie really gives you everything action-wise. It doesn't give you everything in the movie, and that definitely will fall in our good category. But it is a letdown, man. I was really excited to see more of the shrinking and the enlarging stuff that they were going to do in this movie, and I what I got was great. I mean, I really think it all works really well. But I'd already seen almost all of it, and the movie's also kind of predictable. The story is a solid story. Like I said, we have to clean up this entire unit and kind of wrap up the Janet and Hank story. So then hopefully we can start pushing these guys somewhere bigger and more important, because the cast is certainly there, and these actors are all right there. But it's fairly predictable, and that's really upsetting and kind of disappointing for this movie. But like I said, the night of, I came out, I had a great time, because it's fun to watch. But when you think about it, it left me wanting more. And I remember coming out of here going, man, I just want more. I want more of that action. And the reason is, I've seen almost all of it. The other big letdown in this movie for me is Michelle Pfeiffer as Janet Van Dyne, the mother to Hope Van Dyne. And I don't mean that in the fact that Michelle Pfeiffer doesn't show up. She shows up in a big bad way, man. She feels like she is in that kind of a groove and in that kind of a place as she was last time we saw her in a superhero movie, way back with the Batman sequel, back in, with Michael Keaton. And she is in that realm, and she is in that zone, and when she's on screen, crushes it. Problem? Barely on screen. Her one big moment in the movie really doesn't even belong to her. It plays phenomenally, but it's not really hers, and that's a little disappointing, because it looked like she showed up and she was ready to play. She looks phenomenal. I sat there and I was just like, wow, man, Michelle Pfeiffer looks great, and especially looks great in this role. I just want more of her, man. If we get to a 3, like I said, you kind of have this place where you could almost play with everybody, man. You could play with the original Ant-Man and Wasp and the new Ant-Man and Wasp. I would love to see something like that, but definitely want more Michelle Pfeiffer, because she seems like she is willing and ready to go. Same thing here with Lawrence Fishburne, too, who plays Dr. Bill Foster. He, again, shows up, and he delivers typical Lawrence Fishburne. He's not bringing anything kind of new, but look, I love me some Lawrence Fishburne, man, and he's great on camera. He has great chemistry. He's a really nice supporting ad. He plays really well with Paul Rudd a couple times, and his interactions with Michael Douglas's Hank Pym is also fantastic. So, he plays really well, but just not a lot to do. He's really used for kind of an exposition device, which also is an issue, too, that we'll talk about in a minute, where I think he could have used more visual storytelling rather than having, Bill just kind of tell us things that we need to know. But look, like I said, he shows up really nice. Would have liked to have seen him get to play a little more, and maybe he will down the road. Then the other, the final real big thing with this movie, it does fall back into the villain problem that the MCU has. I did rave about Hannah John-Kamen. I apologize. I said Anna John-Kamen in the live reaction. It is Hannah John-Kamen. She is phenomenal, but issues with the villains and the amount of villains in this movie. Maybe just too many. Walton Goggins, first off. Look, Walton Goggins is here doing, again, what Walton Goggins does really well. And he's fun to play around with. He has a really nice scene that I mentioned earlier in my live reaction when I came out with Hope, with Evangeline Lilly. That plays really well, and I like that. But his character doesn't really bring or advance the story in any way. He's kind of like a middleman that maybe never had to see the screen. He takes you out of the movie a few times, and he kind of takes up screen time that could have been used by other characters. And mostly it's because it doesn't drive the story forward in a big way, where he could have just popped up for that first scene and then been gone. Playing Sonny Birch, who is one of the comic book characters, okay, that's maybe why we're putting him in there. doesn't set up any of the Sonny Birch stuff all that well either. And certainly there's no hints toward Darren Cross or any of the real comic book stuff that Birch would bring to the field. So he just kind of feels like he's thrown in there to throw in like a character name that we might know, and that's unfortunate. And not so, it's unfortunate, one, to not be able to use Walton Goggins correctly, but also unfortunate because we don't really need. We don't need him there. There's really no major purpose for his character, and that's unfortunate. And then with Ghost, Hannah John-Kamen, I'm going to use her as my transition into the good because there's way more good with her than bad. But she does fall into that villain trope. Well, not even the regular villain trope for Marvel. She's actually got a really solid backstory. Kind of very similar to how they kind of play with the Killmonger, only this is more exposition than showing. Which I think hurts it. I think we could have had some flashbacks to multiple different things about her character. We learn a bunch of stuff about her that I would have liked to have seen in action on screen as the storytelling device rather than just the exposition. But the other thing, too, is because of that, they make you sympathize, which, again, is something I always credit. When you have a good villain, it's because you can sympathize or empathize with that character. And you certainly can here with Ghost. The problem is she never really feels like a villain because you totally understand where she's coming from. In a way that like she's definitely a threat, but like she never feels like a bad guy, and it plays well for where she ends up character wise. But yeah, it's everything about her is cool, and this is where we're gonna swing into the good because I want to talk about the good about Hannah John-Kamen's performance and her character of Ghost. Her performance is fantastic. The whole concept of Ghost is essentially that her body is being torn apart and put back together all the time. That's why she kind of phases in and out of reality, which brings a ton of physical pain. And that's her driving factor. It's something that we can totally identify with, but the way she performs that, man, like she brings it in this movie. She does get a decent amount of face time. She's not always in the in the costume, which is fantastic, man. I love the look of all the wardrobe in this movie. And her Ghost's wardrobe in particular really pops. I love her suit. But you get a lot of time with her out, and her physical performance is really captivating. She pulls your attention immediately when she's on screen, and her voice acting is really good too when she's in the suit. That plays really well, and it has to be all done through voiceover. Now, add on top of that, the way her character works for like the new add-on character. Well, I guess Wasp too. We didn't see her yet, but we know what we're getting sort of with her. Ghost, new character, really like the story that they give her, and again, it makes you empathize with her, but almost too much. But the way she works, man, the way she phases in and out of things, and the way she uses her powers against people and, issues that she runs into, so cool. Visually stunning, captivating. And that goes for this whole movie. This whole movie is filled with visual effects that are just fantastic. The shrinking and like all the Ant-Man stuff you expect, nail, right? Like the shrinking and the way you play, you just want more of stuff we haven't seen. If you would have gotten, I don't know, maybe you don't show, like Ant-Man like using the 18-wheeler as a scooter or things like, maybe cut one or two of those out of the trailer and the action would have popped more. But visually, it's fantastic. And the biggest thing to praise this movie on visually is the de-aging process. We saw this way back with Civil War and Tony, and it was really good, but it looked CGI'd, right? Like you could tell like they had done something. They de-aged Lawrence Fishburne, Michael Douglas, and Michelle Pfeiffer in this movie. Mind-blowingly good. Like, it's even better than Kurt Russell in Guardians, which was a drastic improvement from the last time we saw it. It looks like we just went 20 years ago, grabbed those people, put them in the movie. It's wild, and it doesn't look fake in the least bit, and it really plays well. So like I said, the visual effects in this movie are fantastic. You want to see more of that stuff play because they're doing a really good job with it. The other thing that too works really well in this movie before we dive into all the characters that are just awesome, right? Like and I talked about the story is, I like that there's an emotional beat, there's a real family core. I love the group dynamic of Paul Rudd and Evangeline Lilly and Michael Douglas, and then also Michael Pena and the ex-con security guys. The story works really well for all of them, but it's nothing humongous. Like I said, I think they could have pushed this movie further. But something that certainly does help this movie, the score and the soundtrack. And the soundtrack more than anything, man. There's one particular group they use a couple times in the movie, and just brought me back to my childhood, and I was like, oh man, I love that song, and it fits the scene so well. But the soundtrack and the score really do amplify the scenes and the humor and the action that we get in the movie. Now getting into the good stuff, man. This is the top of the top, baby. Paul Rudd. I freaking love this guy. I was so excited when he got cast to be Ant-Man. Because look, anybody can be a superhero, right? I mean, we can get you into shape. There are stunt doubles. But what he brings to the MCU comedy-wise, I just love. And he is so on fire in this movie, man. His comedic timing is so spot on and perfect the whole movie. He rarely misses a single beat. And the action, as always, with the Ant-Man is great. We know what we're getting with him. We get a lot of fun with him in the Ants again, now that Anthony isn't around. So he goes through some naming stuff that's a lot of fun. He has the opening sequence of the movie, because he's on house arrest and playing with his daughter. Fantastic, man. And that's really maybe where he almost thrives even better than the humor. I mean, the humor is really peak, but getting to watch Paul Rudd play Scott Lang, the dad, is awesome. He gets to spend a lot more time with Cassie. He gets a really nice assist from Judy Greer and Bobby Cannavale when they pop up. And that family dynamic there is fantastic, as well as his family dynamic with Hope and Hank. I love the way he plays with all of his supporting cast so well. Rudd really knows how to work a room. He knows when he's in a room and who he's in with and how to play off those people correctly. And it all just plays so well. And like I said, I love getting to see him play Dad. And Abby Ryder Fortson, who plays Abby Ryder Fortson, who plays Cassie, his daughter, is fantastic, man. She has some moments in this movie where her eyes light up and her facial expressions and little smiles and things. They're like these little inside messages between her and Scott that are great. I absolutely love all that stuff on top of all the Ant-Man. Now, again, I'll say it throughout this whole thing. It's disappointing that we don't get to see him do more Ant-Man stuff than what we see in the trailer, but a ton of fun. And then there's some major implications for Scott and the whole group at the end of this movie. I said it in my live reaction. Do not leave. The post-credit scene, since we're talking about it, the one that comes at the very end of the credits, you don't need to stay for. You'll read it online, and you'll be like, oh, yeah, I definitely didn't need to stay for that. But do not leave before the mid-credit scene. There's an awesome credits animation. It's kind of like action figure set pieces, almost as like a storyboard. Really, really cool. After that, make sure you stick around for that sequence because there is huge implications for Scott Lang and the whole gang there. And the last thing before we move on from him, too, he has one moment in this movie. He has a couple moments. His chemistry with, as I mentioned, with Lawrence Fishburne is really good, even though we saw that most of that scene in the trailer. The one about comparing sizes and stuff really works really well, and they both kind of have a thing with each other as far as working with Hank, and we'll get to why that's there. But they work really well on scale. Like I said, he plays with everybody really well. But he does have this one sequence with Michelle Pfeiffer, sort of, that is brilliant, and it's really in a spot where he shines, man. It is just Paul Rudd operating at full capacity, and I love it. Now, after Paul Rudd, I said this in my live reaction, I was a big fan. Evangeline Lilly as Hope Van Dyne is great. I calmed down a little bit on her after seeing the movie, because she doesn't really get to have too much fun, or at least look like she's having fun. Story-wise, she's very one-track minded, right? She is on a mission to save her mom, and that kind of is driving her in a more serious tone for her character, so it doesn't quite mesh with what's going on screen all the time. But she delivers, man. She plays the role that she's given well enough. Her action sequences pop big time. Again, we've seen them, but still, they pop, and they pop big time. And she works well in all of it. Her chemistry with Paul Rudd is just fantastic. It's just natural chemistry. When they're on screen together, you can just feel that it's there. And they do have a really nice chemistry moment in the movie that's hysterical. And like I said, I love her whole storyline with Michael Douglas's Hank Pym and trying to find her mom, and that whole story is just great. And, she really delivers on all of those things. The one thing I would say with Evangeline Lilly is I would like to see her having more fun. She seemed really excited at the end of Ant-Man to become Wasp. And look, she's got a very specific thing on a very strict deadline. Like, if they don't get this done, they might never get her mom. So I get why she is as serious as she is in the movie. But again, if we get to a third one, liven her up a little bit, man. Let her have fun. Let her and Paul Rudd play off each other more. Maybe get them into some kind of a fun heist flick. Like I said, there are heist elements in this movie, but doesn't hit it the way the first one does. So again, I think there's huge potential with Evangeline Lilly here because she's really good. But we got to push the envelope by the time we get to the next one. Then, of course, Michael Pena is back with the whole ex-con security crew, as I mentioned, T.I. and David Dastmalchian. They're great. I love their chemistry. T.I. and Dastmalchian get one sequence outside of the office that's fantastic, and it's just like, it's one of those, like, again, screen time is something that wasn't shared very well. And you want more of these guys because they really work so well when they're on screen and they make you laugh. None other than Michael Pena, far and away. We get one Michael Pena sequence in this movie, man, where you get fast-talking, storytelling Michael Pena, and it's brilliant. I honestly thought it was better than his storytelling sequence in the first Ant-Man. But it's just fantastic. I go watch Michael Pena play around in this world all the time. You can tell he's always having fun on screen. And I just when he comes on, man, every time he's on screen, burst of energy and immediate laughter. I absolutely adore Michael Pena in this movie. And then Michael Douglas, great Hank Pym, man. He really got to play with the character a lot more in this one than he did in the first one. And he really drives home the Hank Pym character really, really well. You get this feeling of like the family man who's a dad and he has a wife and he loves his family. But you also get that, in the comics, Hank isn't a real likable guy. He created Ultron, not Tony, and he's very combative. He's not always a good guy. And you get that from Hank, man. You get that from his relationship with, Lawrence Fishburne's character. Bill, I think it's Bill Foster. But you get it with his character, and you can see why they fell apart and why they don't get along, and I love that Pym just has no regrets about it. It feels very authentic, and Douglas just thrives in this movie, man. He nails it. The one thing, and Michelle Pfeiffer didn't get a lot of screen time. The one thing I would say, I'd like to get to see both of them, but especially Douglas, now that he's been in two of these, I'd like to get to see him get involved in the action a little bit, right? Like, when you're doing the CGI stuff, it's not hard to be able to get older actors to be able to go do the action. I think Douglas and Pfeiffer both could pull it off in extraordinary fashion. I definitely would love to see that. But like I said, Douglas is phenomenal. He plays really well with everybody. And like I said, that group, man, that Hope and Scott and Hank grouping, and now hopefully, with the addition to Jenna, I think that'll only get better. But I really love what they're building there. I just want to see it fleshed out and bigger and better if we get to a third one. And finally, Randall Park, who plays Agent Jimmy Woo. As I mentioned, the whole house arrest, Scott's right at the end of it, and he now gets pulled into this mission kind of a bit. So there's a lot of back and forth with the house, and there's a lot of Randall Park popping in to check in, and a lot of times where he thinks Scott is doing something wrong when he's not. And just really fantastic comedy. They play so well together. Jimmy kind of has that Phil Coulson feel. So I'd like to see him play around some more, and maybe come back, for some more Ant-Man. I don't know. I thought Randall Park did a really good job. He makes you laugh every time he's on screen. Love his chemistry with Paul Rudd. They have really good interactions with him and his whole family. So look, overall, man, this movie is a ton of fun. Did it reach the heights that it could have? No. I think its ceiling is definitely a little bit higher. But like I said, I think if this movie gets me to a third Ant-Man and Wasp movie, well, second Ant-Man and Wasp movie, but third Ant-Man world movie, if that gets me to where I think they could go, then I'm totally fine with what I get here. Just don't give it all away. And it's so disappointing, man. Like, the more I think about it, so disappointing when I think about all the action. It was all stuff we'd seen before, because Marvel's so good at hiding that normally. But on the overall, this movie's a ton of fun. If you're in for a good summer flick, go check this movie out, man. Paul Rudd will just, you'll absolutely adore him. You'll adore this cast. You'll have a good time. You'll laugh. You'll smile. You will not come, well, like I said, there's a post-credit sequence that has some major implications. But the main movie, so much fun, man. Such a great time. I love this world. I want more of it. Like, really, go for it, man. Like, you could go to such big places. Go to those giant, man. Yes, I said Ant-Man the other night on my my live reaction. I know that's Giant Man. It's just the same guy. But yeah, no, I mean, look, you could do some big things, I think, with this world. I love to see them. They really need to go and swing for the fences with the next one. But ton of fun. Go check this movie out. That's all I gotta say. Your turn now. Hit those comments. Let me know if you've seen the movie. No spoilers, but what did you think? And if you haven't, have I enticed you? Are you excited? Go see this movie. Have some fun at the movies for once with a Marvel flick. We haven't had a ton of fun with Marvel flicks recently. We're coming out like you're just trying to rip my heart and soul out every time, and you don't have that really hit here. So go check it out. Have some fun, man. Hit those comments. Let me know what you think. As always, if you like this video, please give me a thumbs up. And as always, if you are new here, please hit that subscribe button and the little bell so you get alerts every time I make a new video. For the C-Man Cinema Sit Down, I am the C-Man. I am signing off or shrinking down. Peace! Oh, that didn't work.